one of you for joining us today. We are pleased to welcome those of you who have been able to attend and contribute to this webinar. This webinar title, ICC decision against Israeli leaders. Could it make a difference? So as it's clear from the title that today it's a crucial webinar. We will discuss the implications of the International Criminal Court decision to issue arrest warrants for Israeli leaders. This decision obliges ACC member states and Interpol to act, and raising the critical question, could this be a turning point in holding Israeli leaders accountable for ongoing violations in Palestine, including the genocide in Gaza, systemic torture of prisoners, and brutal policies in the West Bank? First of all, let me remind you of today's key points of discussion. First, we have ICC arrest warrants and the implications of the ICC's recent decision to issue arrest warrants for Israeli leaders, okay, including the legal obligations of member states and Interpol. Second, ongoing genocide in Gaza, the continuation of this genocide since October 2023, with a focus on its impact on civilians. Third, West Bank brutality, escalating violations and brutal policies in the West Bank, including the systematic torture of prisoners. Four, international accountability, whether the ICC's decision could be a turning point in holding Israeli leaders accountable for war crimes and crimes against humanity. Fifth, how the international community, including member states and legal institutions, can enforce the ICC's ruling and what challenges lie ahead. And last, voices of justice, insight from legal experts, activists, and academics on the role of international law and advocacy in addressing these violations. Before we get started, we have many speakers today, so I'll go quickly over these people. So we have speakers today, Mr. Harun Reza, lawyer of the March 30th Movement and the Hind Rajab Foundation, Dr. Emilio David, Palestinian Chilean lawyer and professor of law, Dr. Lex Stackenberg, senior advisor at ARDD and former director of UNRWA operations, Mr. Said Ibrahim Said Nouh, chairman of Malaysian Parliament Caucus for Palestine, Matthias Thompson, legal advisor in international humanitarian law and lecturer in law, Dr. Patrick Zand, professor of international humanitarian law, Eric Warso, U.S. social media influencer, and Sydney Thornton, member of the Student Justice for Palestine movement in the U.S. So quickly, I'll let you know the presentation format. Each speaker will have 4 to 5 minutes to present his testimony and insights. After all speakers have finished their presentations, if time permits, we will have a discussion session lasting no more than 20 minutes. During this session, speakers can add their thoughts and comments on other speakers' contributions. At the end of the webinar, each speaker will have 1 minute to provide their final words and conclusion message. Okay, so let's start, and thank you very much for listening, and let's welcome to the floor first speaker, Mr. Said Ibrahim Said Nouh, chairman of Malaysian Parliament Caucus for Palestine. Mr. Said, yeah, please, you have the floor now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nadir. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi
Alaikum
wabarakatuh.
assalam wa rahmatullah.
Good day, everyone, fellow speakers and viewers. It is an honor and a privilege to be here in this webinar, and I thank the Arab Organization for Human Rights in UK for having me. As mentioned earlier by Nadir just now, we are going to discuss about the ICC's arrest warrant against Israeli leaders, and would it make a difference? To me, initially, I would just like to state that it is a move that has sparked significant debate across diplomatic, legal, and humanitarian spheres. This decision raises fundamental questions. Can it bring about justice? Will it change the realities on the ground for Palestinians? And how might it shape international law going forward? So to frame my discussion, I will explore Malaysia's position, other international perspectives, and what we might realistically expect from this landmark decision. Malaysia has long been an outspoken advocate for the Palestinian cause. Our Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim has consistently condemned the systematic oppression of Palestinians and called for international accountability. Malaysia sees the ICC's actions as a necessary step in holding Israel accountable for alleged war crimes and crimes of humanity and also human rights abuses. Under Anwar Ibrahim's leadership, Malaysia has intensified calls for global solidarity to challenge Israeli impunity. The government emphasizes the importance of multilateralism, urging nations to work collectively to ensure the ICC's authority is respected. While Malaysia is not a signatory to the Rome Statute, its support for ICC investigations into Palestine reflects a broader commitment to justice and also human rights. As far as the international landscape is concerned, I tend to see that the ICC's arrest warrants have polarized the global opinion. Many countries, especially within the global south, view the decision as a historic step towards accountability. The OIC, to which Malaysia belongs, has applauded the ICC's commitment to justice for Palestine. Similarly, blocs such as the non-aligned movement echo these sentiments, underscoring the importance of upholding international law. However, resistance to the ICC's action is strong. The United States, obviously, and several European allies have expressed concerns, citing potential political biases and implications for the peace process. US opposition to ICC action against Israel also raises questions of double standards and bias given US support for the ICC's investigation into and arrest warrants issued against Vladimir Putin. Israel has outright rejected the ICC's jurisdiction, claiming it as illegitimate. And now they have filed for an appeal to the arrest warrant. And this, to me, dichotomy highlights the deep divisions in how international law is perceived and applied. But what would be the challenges of this arrest of or issue of warrant? Firstly, I think enforcing ICC arrest warrants against Israeli leaders will not be straightforward. Israel is not a party to the Rome Statute, and its leaders are unlikely to cooperate. Moreover, key global powers, particularly the United States, may shield Israel officials from prosecution. Without robust international backing, the ICC faces significant hurdles in executing its warrants, reinforcing a perception of selective justice. But what can we expect out of this? Despite these challenges, it is important to say that the ICC's actions are not without significance. The issuance of arrest warrants also provides, to me, further indications that Israeli officials must change their conduct of the war or else risk additional charges for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and potentially a genocide. The arrest warrants send a powerful message that no leader is above the law, that this could increase pressure on Israel to reconsider its policies in the occupied territories. It also bolsters the Palestinian cause, providing a legal framework for future accountability efforts. Furthermore, the warrants may inspire other nations to take bolder stances. For instance, countries in the global south might strengthen their advocacy for Palestine at international forums, leveraging the ICC's actions to amplify their demands for justice. Just as what we saw from the judgment from ICJ, I think this is another leverage that can be used to amplify the demands for justice. On a broader level, the ICC's decision could spur reforms in international law, encouraging greater equity in its application. While it may not bring immediate change, I can presume that, but it sets a precedent that impunity for grave crimes will not go unchallenged. Fellow panelists, viewers, in conclusion, the ICC's arrest warrant against Israeli leaders is a critical step in the fight for accountability and justice. While its impact remains uncertain, It has already galvanized global attention to the plight of Palestinians and the need for a fairer international legal system. As Malaysia and like-minded nations continue their advocacy, the path forward lies in my opinion, in a sustained global pressure and solidarity to uphold the principles of justice and humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sayed. And let me just I have one question about your word. Is that so? After all, you think that this kind of warrants is more moral than really applicable warrants, and its effect it will be something you can say it's moral not to be applied on some states or some other states?
Yeah, I believe it is a form of pressure. Uh, right now, yes, you may say, and some of the other countries are saying, even France now is saying that there is immunity for Netanyahu in this case. But I think again, it's the issue of how you view or how we view the powers of jurisdiction of ICC. As far as I'm concerned, yes, there were cases before this. For example, in the issue in the arrest of warrant against Vladimir Putin, it has been already more than a year that he has been out, but no arrest has been done. But I think for the same fact that there is pressure there, so there are limited extensions or in a way, visits to be done by, in this case, Netanyahu, that he could be arrested in some of the states that are a part of ICC. They are part of the Rome Statute. So I think it is something worthwhile, something which would be receivable by the Palestinians especially, and by those who have been fighting for the rights and justice for the Palestinians.
A bit too late and a bit too little as far as we're concerned, because I think it's quite clear that looking at the actual situation of Palestine in general and Gaza specifically, I think there's no doubt in any reasonable person's mind that what is happening and what has been happening is clear-cut genocide. Now, the Office of the Prosecutor, Karim Khan, did not apply for a warrant regarding genocide, which he should have, as far as I'm concerned, as far as we are concerned. And the ICC could have done something about that, but they didn't. Having said that, the issuance of the issuing of the arrest warrants is a vindication for everyone who's been working tirelessly towards this moment. So it is something very positive. And it does mean that at least Galant and Netanyahu will be sweating a bit more as soon as they board any plane going anywhere, because they won't be sure if the country which they're flying to will in fact affect the arrest warrants. And the other important point is other people in the military and in the administration, for example, of the CLA or the COGAT, the COGAT, who are responsible for the administration of the West Bank and Gaza, will also be sweating as far as I'm concerned, because the next step is for the ICC and the Office of the Prosecutor, firstly, of course, to issue arrest warrants for other senior members of the Israeli military, as well as the Israeli so-called civilian administration, which doesn't exist, but that's what the Israelis call it, regarding command and control responsibility for the starvation of the people of Gaza. Not just Netanyahu and Gallant, but others as well. So that's the first point. The other point, and just coming back to the point the honorable gentleman just made, France has been flip-flopping about this, because as we all know, France, when the arrest warrants were issued against Putin and the lady whose name I forget, who was the head of, I think, some ministry regarding child affairs, regarding children who had been abducted in Ukraine, France was one of the first nations to put out a statement saying that they would in fact enforce those specific arrest warrants. And at that time, so about 1 year ago, they didn't speak about any immunity for heads of state. And as soon as this decision came from the pre-trial chamber of the ICC, they suddenly went into defense mode and started talking about so-called non-existing immunity for heads of state. There is no immunity for heads of state regarding the Rome Statute in the ICC. It's non-existent. that immunity might exist at the French national level has nothing to do with the obligation of France and all other signatories to the Rome Statute to arrest and transfer anybody who has an arrest warrant issued against themselves. So France, Germany, and all the other countries who have come out and said that there was some doubt about them enforcing the arrest warrants are in clear contravention of their international obligations as countries, as nation states, and as signatories to the Rome Statute. That's the second point that I wanted to make. And as the legal counsel for the March 30th movement and the Hind Rajab Foundation, we are just getting warmed up. We've already submitted the 1,000 IDF soldier complaint about 5 or 6 weeks ago now. We're moving on to other individuals who are higher up, lower than Netanyahu and Gallant, but higher up in the command and control structure, and we're coming for them. So as far as we are concerned, these are the first arrest warrants which have been issued, but we hope that these will be the first of many arrest warrants which Karim Khan will request and the ICC will in fact issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Haroon, for this contribution. And may I say that you give some weight to this arrest warrants, because at the same time, some people all over the world think that these are meaningless and it will not be applied. So you think that it's a start of a new way of dealing with, let's say, word criminals and especially heads of states? I mean, there is a kind of light at the end of the tunnel that says that one day we can see a head of state before the International Criminal Court.
Well, it's happened before, so this isn't something which has never happened before. It's happened before at the ICC level. And the only difference is these are Israelis. So there's no reason whatsoever it shouldn't happen. But much more importantly, I guarantee you, Netanyahu and Gallant will not be traveling anywhere else except for Israel and the US for the coming 50 years. Mark my words.
Maybe Hungary?
I don't think, because I don't think they'll even dare that, because Hungary is still an EU country, and although we know what the stance of Hungary is right now, but I think
the statement.
Yes, I follow that, of course, which is legal, excuse my language, legal rubbish. It's legal nonsense, as I just explained.
Okay.
But to be very clear, EU countries can also be sanctioned, and Hungary has been sanctioned before because of certain policies within Hungary regarding the judiciary, as have other countries. So I don't think that Hungary and other countries will be welcoming to Netanyahu and Gallant, especially because...
gesture.
Sorry?
Just as a kind of gesture to Netanyahu.
Yeah, I understand. But even then, I think they won't be really happy to have them come in because of the international pressure which will be lodged within the EU, for example. And again, the most important point is if international law practitioners and activists and other people can get Netanyahu and Gallant to sweat a bit more, I think we'll already have achieved a lot, especially looking at the genocide which is happening.
I understand this very much. Thank you very much, Haroon, for your contribution. And now we give the floor to Mr. Matthias Thompson, legal advisor in international humanitarian law and lecturer in law. Mr. Matthias, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, please go
Thank
ahead.
you very much for having me. It's an honor to speak as part of this panel. Perhaps I begin by responding to a couple of the questions that have been asked already. In response to the question about whether this is a moral or a legal moment, I think it's definitely both. And just in defense of the fact that this is still a significant legal decision, it's a decision by an objective court, by 3 impartial judges of the pretrial chamber of the International Criminal Court, basically confirming that there are reasonable grounds to believe that crimes within the jurisdiction of the court have been committed. And I'll go through what some of those crimes are in a moment, though I'm sure it's known to all of the audience here. In and of itself, that is a legal determination, which is different from reporting and from criticisms from human rights bodies that have obviously documented many of these alleged violations. And I think that is significant in and of itself, and also for storytelling purposes, insofar as we have a record, again, from an independent and impartial court. I also think, and I agree with the previous speaker, Haroon, about the significance of this, that we have 124 member state parties who now have a clear obligation to arrest Prime Minister Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, for whom there is an arrest warrant against. That obligation we have had already. Several states come forward and say they would fulfill that obligation, notably the Netherlands, Switzerland, and I believe Canada as well. Those who have been equivocal, and those like France who have shown, as was said before, quite a clear double standard when compared to their response to President Vladimir Putin, I believe would also, as Haroon indicated, refrain from inviting those for whom there's an arrest warrant issued against to their state. So it still, I think, effectively acts as a travel ban because they would want to avoid the political and public relations fallout that may occur from having them within their states. So again, that in of itself is significant. I think it also falls within the broader legal landscape in that all countries have an obligation under international humanitarian law to prosecute alleged violations of international crimes, in particular war crimes, where they fall within their jurisdiction. A number of states have domestic universal jurisdiction within their domestic criminal codes. And so such persons for whom an arrest warrant is issued, where there is serious allegations of war crimes, would fall within their jurisdiction, and therefore they would have an obligation to arrest and prosecute those, even if they are not ICC member states. And so that is something for which continued international pressure can be levied. Moreover, as we know, we've also had the International Court of Justice release its decision where they noted that provisional measures that Israel must facilitate and ensure the passage of humanitarian relief, including by opening border crossings, but instead there were continuing attacks causing mass displacement amidst an ongoing humanitarian catastrophe. The ICJ further held that third states must not recognise as lawful the situation resulting from its illegal presence in the occupied Palestinian territory. This, as well as the ICC decision, I think has implications for how third states interact with Israel. We've already seen examples of weapons transfers causing a violation potentially of domestic law. Could also have been run as a violation of international humanitarian law by facilitating ongoing war crimes or allegations of war crimes. So what's the connection there to the significance of this arrest warrant? I'm not a political scientist. I focus on international law here. However, I do think that part of this connection is with the travel or effective travel ban, the obligation to arrest, the obligation on third states to investigate and prosecute, the obligation to uphold the International Court of Justice findings, is that it can mount continued pressure, which may lead eventually to some regime change within Israel. We know that he is not the most popular prime minister at the moment. It also may change over time relationships between third states and Israel, and all of these factors may, in time, facilitate an arrest. So I think there is some hope, though. Of course, I do agree with the current assessment that this is unlikely in the very short term. I know I was short on time, but perhaps just momentarily, I'll just talk about the crimes themselves and those which have been included and those which have not. Perhaps in the interest of time, I'll just focus on those which have not. Significantly, there is the war crime of intentional starvation. I think if they were to be arrested, it is a significant question any time an international criminal tribunal focuses on individual criminal responsibility. There's the question of mental elements, which can be difficult to prove. Having said that, we have seen significant evidence, of course, that those in the upper levels of the Israeli government and military were very well aware of ongoing starvation of Palestinians. There were repeated calls to allow for humanitarian access, and so the continued decision to refuse humanitarian access and to continue its policies, certainly I would think, would amount to evidence of some intention in that regard, and I'm sure was part of the pre-trial chambers determination, and of course would be ongoing relevant evidence. Just in terms quickly of those crimes which have not been included, Haroon mentioned genocide is notably missing, despite the International Court of Justice having previously ruled that there were plausible grounds for believing that genocide had occurred. Arguably, the reasonable grounds to believe standard for the International Criminal Court is comparable to plausible, and so arguably they should have been, it should have been included. Extermination, which bears some similarities as a crime against humanity to genocide, was included in the arrest warrant, but regrettably was not confirmed in the decision. and so there perhaps could be some pushback on that. Also, forcible displacement or forcible transfer was not included, nor were various other war crimes, including murder, though murder as a crime against humanity was included. Now, of course, there may be strategic reasons for that from the perspective of the Office of the Prosecutor. I also echo Haroon's comment that there is certainly opportunity for additional charges to be added, as well to the existing arrest warrants, as well as additional arrest warrants that could be issued in the following months or years. And so I think it is a significant moment. I think there's much work to continue to document evidence and also push for further arrest warrants and potentially additional charges. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Matthias. And as usual, I have something to ask you about is that, yeah, we know that the impact of these arrest warrants on banning Netanyahu and Gallup from traveling or whatever. But will this, as you are international humanitarian law expert, will this have some effect on the humanitarian situation in Gaza and the West Bank? I mean, such a declaration, such an propaganda which haven't been declared about the situation there and about the. Will this have any impact on the ground in Gaza and West Bank?
It's very difficult to say, and I suppose the early indications are no, that it wouldn't have an immediate effect, unfortunately. The arrest warrants have been, vehemently denied by Israel, and there's been others within the international community who have unfortunately not viewed it for what it is, which, as I said earlier, is an objective, impartial determination by a court of law, which I think is significant. But no, regrettably, I don't see, and there'd be others who would be better placed to speak on this, but I don't see an immediate change likely in Israel's conduct in how it wages the war. But I don't think that prejudices the fact that it could change international pressure, which in even the short term, maybe not the immediate term, but in the short to medium, in the short to medium term, it could have an impact on how it wages the war if it's becoming increasingly unpopular domestically and internationally. But I think we also have to be realistic that the more immediate solution is likely to be political. Having said that, an arrest warrant is significant. One thing I just wanted to mention was that titles do matter, and so now it is perfectly legal and appropriate to say that Prime Minister Netanyahu is an alleged war criminal for whom there is an outstanding arrest warrant, and that type of language can be significant politically. And so you never know. Hopefully, it does have some impact in the short term on the ground.
Thank you very much, Matthias, for your contribution. And we move now to Dr. Patrick Zand, Professor of International Humanitarian Law. Dr. Patrick, can you hear me? Hello, Dr. Patrick Zand.
Excuse me, the mic was off.
It's okay. It happens.
I join all the other speakers to thank you very much for organizing this session.
Thank you.
I must also say that I join all what has been said with a lot of accuracy and strong words. All what has been said, I can just endorse it and join my words. I'm not only a professor of international humanitarian law both in Mexico and in Paris, in Sciences Po Paris, but also I'm the president of a newly created association which is called Lawyers for the Respect of International Law, in particular focusing on that particular armed conflict and situation, not only especially in the occupied Palestinian territory.
I think it's very indicative name, and to say that the respect of international law. I think that's the real question we really want to answer here.
And as you certainly, I don't know how it is in Britain today, but nor in the Middle East. I've not been there for some time now. But just talking about humanitarian law is critical and very important, because that's the only referee about the words we use, the qualification of the situation we make, as well as the law applicable and the qualification of the crimes. Many have been mentioned, including by the prosecutor and by the court now. And that is very important, because what was at stake so far is the very credibility and integrity of international law, and in particular of international humanitarian law, these essential considerations of humanity, these laws of humanities, as well as this requirement of the public conscience, because we are just there where we are all under the shock that these fundamental basis before barbarism have been shaken, and which is shaking, including the international peace and security and the conscience. So it's not only a moral, but it's a legal perspective. And all the structure of international law have been put at stake in the world. The very obligation, the most imperative obligations of international law, which are enshrined in humanitarian law, which are these laws of humanity that I mentioned, the obligation to respect and to ensure respect in all circumstances of these norms and fundamental principles, not only have been violated, but most of the states, particularly the Western states in the world, have not implemented and respected their obligation to ensure respect in all circumstances. And that is certainly the most critical thing which has put international law at stake and has shaken its credibility. The decision of the court, very late, all what has been said is very true. It's very late, but at least for the first time, but at least I would say the court has saved its neck, has saved its neck. This credibility would have disappeared if ever it had not taken the decision to issue this arrest warrants. And so this is very important. For the first time also, a non-African state or leaders is put on trial or would be put on trial. That's very important, that Israeli at last is recognized, its criminal character of its practices is put into the spotlight. And it comes after the orders of the ICJ, which is also very important. The three orders violated, even though they are binding, the very advisory opinion of the court on the occupation on the 19th of July. All this shows that nevertheless, the lawyers are right to continue to believe and struggle for the respect of the law. And it will help in all the dimensions which have been mentioned by my predecessors. The impact will be certainly important, not only because these two persons will not be able to travel, but just because it gives us leverage all over the world to push forward for more respect of the law and to come back to something a little bit different. I believe it will have a huge impact. So the Israeli exception is over, at least so far. The Western powers, some of them, you've mentioned France. I called speaking to you from Paris. Are being put. I mean, their double standards is the vision that the world has of their double standards is put also in bright light, and it's absolutely shameful. And at the end of the day, the Rome Statute will prevails and will prevail. France has issued, as you know, a declaration saying that they will not respect the arrest warrant on behalf, because pretending referring to Article 98 of the Rome Statute, which is absolutely irrelevant, because Article 27 is relevant, and Article 27 says that equally that the parties shall apply equally without any distinction based on official capacity. And we all know that all states, parties to the Rome Statute, have had to review their constitutions in order to withdraw this type of immunity from their heads of states or heads of government. All of them. In my own capacity in the past, for many years, I've been visiting and touring many countries of the world so that they would make these constitutional changes in order to join and adhere or ratify the Rome Statute. So it's a very important thing, and that at least and of course France has taken this decision. Everybody sees that for political reasons, but that's not. I would say it's very shameful, and it has. I hope that not too many countries will do the same. So my word is a word of victory of the law, is a word that international law has been at least safe for some time. The ICC will recover some credibility. And of course, it will take time. But all what my predecessors said is very true. It will open the way for, we know one day, other command and control officers within IDF or political leaders. We know that other crimes, and of course, genocide is there, and the crime against humanity, of extermination. But I would say that if you look at Article 8 of the Rome Statute on war crimes, A and B, most of those crimes have been committed or are committed daily. So there is a door open to more, and not to speak about settlements and what is taking place in the West Bank. And ethnic cleansing, even though it's not a war, it's not an international crime defined as such, but at least its components. So we are certainly, the door is certainly open for lawyers to continue to struggle, for you as journalists, as all the militants active in defending international law and also the right of Palestinians, including their right to self-determination, will be have the capacity today, or have they feel like with more envy or more strength to continue to struggle. And it will have an impact. It will have an impact on transfer of weapons. It will have an impact because violating the ATT, violating the ICJ orders, violating or disregarding the advisory opinion of the ICJ, and now violating the Rome Statute in not implementing and arresting or surrendering these war criminals and these two Israeli leaders, would certainly have a great impact, including in political terms. So that's a little bit what I wanted to say. Yes, this decision is late. We know the circumstances, but it's very significant. It will have a huge impact, including in the eventual possible settlement of the conflict. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Patrick, but let me just make use of the opportunity to ask you one question. Is it enough that a country is not a signatory of ICC? Is it enough to evade accountability? And that's it? From a legal point of view.
From a legal point of view, the argument was to say that international customary law could eventually be, which is the argument that France has used, from my understanding at least, to express their position, is just not acceptable because it would contradict the obligation with regard to the Rome Statute. And that is, Article 27 is very clear, and Article 98 cannot be opposed to it. So I would say that it will have an impact for all other. Remember the case of that finally didn't prevail when prosecutor Ben Sousa has not been able to go forward with the case in Afghanistan and CIA in Pakistan. Such a situation may evaluate, and so it might give more strength. And I would remind everyone here that within a few days, there will be the Assembly of State Parties in The Hague of the Rome Statute, and I'm sure that there the 123 countries, high contracting parties to the Rome Statute, will have a say and will suddenly have issue a statement on this particular issue to defend the statute, because this is now the task of all the member states or state parties to the Rome Statute to defend the integrity of the statute. Because I shall remember the importance of the law of treaty, which says that pacta sunt servanda, that the treaty binds all the states, which have an obligation to respect these imperative jus cogens norms which and to ensure the prosecution of all the worst crimes, in particular war crimes, through universal jurisdiction. Because not only there is the ICC with this complementary jurisdiction, there is also an obligation of states to exercise their universal jurisdiction within their own national tribunals. And so it means that nowhere, and there is no exception to that, all states are parties to the Geneva Conventions, and all states have the obligation to have included in their own legislation legislation instituting in universal jurisdiction. Not all have done, but that's an obligation. So in other words, through law, as long as law can prevail over force in a future world order, this type of situation should be, I mean, this type of authors of such crimes would not be able to sleep quietly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Patrick, for this hopeful insights about the future. And now we will move to Sydney Thornton, member of the Student Justice for Palestine movement in the US. Sydney, or in America, and good morning, and please, you have the floor now.
Hi, and good morning. Thank you for having me. As a member of Students for Justice in Palestine, as well as just an activist based in DC, I've been able to witness kind of the US's reaction and how both students and activists have kind of been kind of attacked, especially when in regards to students like at George Washington University, where you have immense suppression, not only, well, specifically, especially against Palestinian students, where you have threats of expulsion, threats of removal from the school. And the question that concerns us specifically is what will happen to students and to activists once Trump comes into office, and how that could potentially affect the amplification of Palestinian voices, Palestinian students, and activist groups. Will the US and the US officials have any type of leaning when it comes to stuff like the ICC decision, and when it comes to activism, and how much of an impact will that have on the administration? It doesn't really seem promising, especially when you look at Trump's previous run, where he further recognized territory in Israel as, or further recognized territory as being a part of Israel, further was more in favor of Israel than in Palestine, or than Palestinians. So I guess the question really is how much the US is willing to really waver in its standing of Palestine. It's kind of looking really dim, especially when you look at just how our current administration already is when it comes to the Democratic Party, with Biden already stating that it's the ICC's decision being outrageous, and that we will continue to stand firmly in support of Israel. So it kind of is it feels a little bit hopeless when it comes from the perspective of students, when it comes from the perspective of activists, when there has already been so many people putting themselves on the line, especially when the movements have been built on the backs of Palestinians, when it built on the backs of international students specifically. And you have Trump coming in, also threatening the deportation and mass deportation specifically of foreign students, foreign activists, foreign protesters, saying that when he comes into office, that's pretty much one of the first things that he plans on doing. Also threatening the continued suppression of protesters, of students, and also threatening financial burdens placed on institutions and universities, which, if it's already an issue that universities have cracked down almost to I would personally say kind of overriding the rights that students should be awarded when it comes to their rights of speech, when it comes to just who universities decide to amplify in terms of their voices or even bring on campus. It's it's kind of scary. I'm not going to lie, as a student and someone who's surrounded by other students who have taken part in such a movement and also taken part in shoulder to shoulder with our Palestinian brothers and sisters. It's frightening on many levels. So I will just end with just saying that going forward with this new administration, it raises a lot of potential questions regarding how it's going to affect not only the issue going on, how it's going to affect basically the US's policies towards Israel, how much they're going to continue to try to protect. I mean, so far since October 7th, they've already given almost $20 billion in aid. So how much further will Trump and his administration be willing to go for in order to try to negate these negate the arrest warrants?
Sydney, thank you very much for your contribution. And we move now to Eric Warsaw, U.S. social media influencer. And Eric, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much for having me. Definitely appreciate it.
Go ahead.
Thank you. All right. So the International Criminal Court issued these arrest warrants, and there's a whole lot of countries around the world that are absolutely obligated to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu if he sets foot on their land. But I mean, realistically, it's going to act more like a travel ban. He's just not going to travel to these countries. It's highly unlikely that he's going to be arrested in any of these countries. If he ever does fall from power and gets arrested, I think he'll be arrested in his own home country by his own courts because he is facing corruption charges at home. So I think out of their sheer arrogance too, just how their kind of tendencies are, they would never allow another country to. I don't think Israel would ever allow him to be brought to the Hague, and they'll deal with him himself. But there is a lot of indirect pressures and a lot of indirect benefits from this for sure. First and foremost is that I'm sure you guys all remember a year ago, many world leaders were too afraid to ever even question Israel. They were too afraid to even bring any of this up. It was like a big taboo. So things like this not only helps break down the taboo even more, but it makes it part of the average everyday dialogue. It's now part of everyday discussion. Hey, this man's a war criminal and look what he's doing. Why is he getting away with it? So it has a lot of indirect benefits too, a lot of indirect benefits. And remember, everybody, that Israel, like its existence, its survival depends on foreign help. They cannot survive on their own. They need military assistance from foreign countries. They need financial assistance from foreign countries. They need political backup from other countries. So now all these other countries, most of them are democracies. And look at how much France is flip-flopping. So you have these leaders have to also answer to their own voters. And like, yeah, why are you sending military help to a war criminal? I mean, so I think it does have a lot of influence, and it does. There's a lot of countries that slowed down the shipment. I mean, they didn't stop it completely, but like, let me take Canada, for example. They slowed down some of the weapons shipments to Israel, which I was kind of shocked at. Even though it's only a little bit, it's still significant. I mean, before it was unquestionable to slow this stuff down. So, I mean, I think it does have a lot of influence. It weakens the strings of Israel's own survival. Israel depends on these countries, and now there's a lot of pressure in these countries to justify why they're sending help and aid to Israel and not trying to help the people in Palestine at all. The military assistance and everything. I mean, so I think it does change. I think it does change things for the better, and as far as which way the pressure goes. It definitely weakens Israel's influence on the world stage. They've lost their reputation. Loss of reputation is a loss of power. And that is definitely what I see. Israel's no longer bullying around things as they used to. They don't get their way as much. Most significantly, I was like a month ago, maybe more than a month ago, when Benjamin Netanyahu went to New York City to the United Nations and spoke in front of the United Nations. And pretty much 95% of the crowd stood up and walked out in protest. I mean, that was amazing. That was amazing. That is not something they would have done a year ago. And so he has a lot less influence. And loss of power on the world stage is also loss of power domestically for Benjamin Netanyahu, too. It wasn't just Benjamin Netanyahu who was on that arrest warrant. It was also Gallant. And remember, Benjamin Netanyahu just fired Gallant. And there's a lot of protesters who back Gallant. And Gallant is also a political rival. So, I mean, I think this just adds fuel to the fire to get rid of Benjamin Netanyahu, even internally. There's right-wing extremists and left-wing extremists in his own country that are both highly dissatisfied about him for different reasons, but they're still dissatisfied. So, I mean, I think that this is absolutely great. I think it adds significantly to the pressure against Benjamin Netanyahu. I think it weakens all the strings of its own survival from all these other foreign countries that need to provide it financial, military, and political assistance for it to survive. So I think it's a great step in the right direction. And definitely thank you and appreciate you for having me up here.
Thank you very much, Eric. It was very insightful one. And in the impact of this arrest warrants is now, I think after 1 hour, we can really figure it out more and more deeply. Thank you very much. And now we move to Mr. Emilio David, Palestinian Chilean lawyer and professor of law. Dr. Emilio.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much.
I hope your kids have already come back.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
And they are in the cage. If you forgive me for, I wanted to ask you at least, I don't know, symbolically 10 seconds of silence for a dear friend and a brave French lawyer, Gilles Debert, who passed away, I think, a couple of days ago. Gilles Debert was the first lawyer to bring a case to the ICC in 2009. I met him in Palestine when he was preparing this case. And he fought so much for justice in Palestine. He's a very interesting case because Gilles Debert did not come from international law or even criminal law. He was a health law lawyer who went to Palestine to advise Palestinians on health issues and saw what he saw. And that was enough to make a huge shift in his life and devote most of the rest of his life to see justice in Palestine. And I wanted to honor his memory with you.
Okay, that's very touching, and let's observe 10 seconds silence for 10 seconds, please. Thank you very much, Emilio, for this gesture, and please, if you can go on with your contribution.
Thank you. Look, I agree with Eric and with all the rest of the speakers, but I wanted to highlight the fact that effectively I agree that this decision has, I think, an important impact in so many ways that we cannot even foresee today. We will see in the future, right? But it goes from political to moral to world standing to etc. And this is something that will unfold in the coming days, and we will be able to maybe predict more concretely what the consequences are. I wanted to bring to your attention the fact that, I mean, things we all know, right? But that we should keep in mind when we talk and we discuss these things. The first thing is that these arrest warrants came after 6 months or more even, right? And so that is a sign that should be explored in our minds. I mean, 6 months, why? Putin, it took a month to the court to decide on arrest warrants, right? Or even more. Lex, you may know better, right? And we know what was going on there, right? The court, like the ICJ, I think, in its own decisions, well, was not was not. I mean, I think the courts are afraid, right? And are afraid for good reasons. I mean, they know the dangers of making these decisions, and so we knew it with Bensouda before, but Karim Khan also, right, related to the public, the pressures that he was under at the time. I imagine that the court, the pre-trial court, must have been under such a pressure that explains, right, these 6 months of deliberations, evaluations, etc. So that gives us a context, right, in which the context in which these arrest warrants were issued. I want to bring to your attention a series of questions, right, signs that need to be explored. The first is the question of, I mean, let's not fool ourselves. I mean, the first question for me is, how was it possible that Karim Khan, a man that reached his position with the green light of the US and the UK precisely because he gave assurances to these countries of the contrary, that that would not happen, right? How is possible that him made this decision? How terrible and how evident from a legal point of view, right, are these Israeli crimes that Han saw no other alternative but to apply for the arrest warrants, right? I mean, I have in mind a very disrespectful metaphor for this, and I was thinking, do I say it or not? Because I don't want to be disrespectful to Karim Khan unnecessarily. Anyways, how terrible and evident Israeli crimes are that Han saw no alternative to apply, even against his own convictions, I'm sure. Right? And also the pre-trial chamber. So no other way, no other alternative but to issue the warrants, even though I can imagine they did not want this. They did not want to have this case in their hands, right? The court in their minds does not need this case. You know, it's a court that is growing, is developing, is not completely established in a certain way, right? It's a new court and vulnerable court. Anyways, regarding their consequences, the consequences of the arrest warrants, well, I would say yes, there are moral, symbolic consequences, but the arrest warrants are not a symbolic or moral act, right? This is law, this is the law, and those who do not implement the arrest warrants should be judged accordingly. It's not that they are not fulfilling or not implementing a moral request. No. They are not implementing the same laws that they were there putting forward some years ago, right? And some of them signed and ratified and have defended so strongly in other cases, right? I will come back to that. So they are violating international legal obligations, and they should be put in front of these constantly. They are also debilitating, of course, the very international legal system that they brag so much about, right? And all of that to protect Israel. We already saw the reactions of the US and France. I mean, look at France. This is such a pirouette back, right, from their first declaration, and this foolish explanation, because Patrick is completely right, right? I mean, there is no legal grounds for what they are saying. Remember, I mean, the hypocrisy and the double standards are so evident, right? I mean, you remember Putin and Mongolia, right? The same French French Minister of Foreign Affairs, when Putin went to Mongolia, said that all countries had an obligation, right, to implement the decision of the ICC, and that Putin should be arrested in Mongolia. That was some months ago. So this is how do we interpret these things? I think politically and legally, it's important not to just mention them. These are signs that we need to explore. And for me, the sign, I mean, the French declaration is a sign of a very worrying situation, which is that for me, I see that truth is no longer a political factor. Yeah, right? I mean, truth is no longer a political factor. These guys have been telling us for 40 months that we are not seeing what we are actually seeing, right? This is their work, to convince us that we are not seeing what we are seeing. And so how do we do politics? And how do we exercise our job, which is the law, in a world where truth is no longer a political factor? And don't dismiss it too easily, because it's not just, I mean, remember Trump in 2016, when he was asked whether he talks about lockers, and you remember grabbing women and etc. And a journalist asks him, are you not afraid that you would lose votes because of that? And he says, look, I could kill someone in downtown Manhattan and I would not lose a vote. And he's right. Actually, he's right. Actually, we have now the evidence of that, right? He won the elections. So therefore, I finish with this. Therefore, the real effects of the arrest warrants, I think, need to be analyzed under. I'm sorry for this. Under a concept, I think that I didn't coin, but I work on in one of my publications, which is the concept of administration of violence, because this is what we are seeing, is how powers, of course, states and in the UN are basically rather than eradicating violence, which is a promise of the UN Charter, right? Eradicating violence at the global level, right? Rather than doing that, they are administering violence by legitimizing their own violence and criminalizing someone else's violence, right? And we see that also in the court, right? Matthias was referring to those crimes that the court did not even mention, but the ICJ decision on the illegality of the occupation also has very important flaws regarding that. The very fact that they never qualify the Israeli occupation as an act of aggression, for example, which is right. So I think the concept of administration of violence is very useful in order to understand the dynamics that we are, and the case of France and the UK and others, I mean, somehow is evidence of that. And so I don't think any of them will arrest Netanyahu or any other Israeli. So what if someone else arrests them? You know, one of the others, the other 124. Well, there we need to have in mind several things, from the Hague Invasion Act, right, that has been actually resorted to in order to threaten at one point, to Senator Lindsey some days ago, right, saying that if you dare to help the ICC in the implementation of these arrest warrants, I mean, we will target you and we will crash your economy. So the question is, and they have done it. I come from a country, Chile, where they did it, right? And they have done it in so many other places. So what if a small country like Chile or others, right, arrest one of them? What can we expect? The crashing of their economy, and considering that, do you think that any of them will dare to do so? So finally, I would say that we need. I think our work at the ICC is done, is going on. It's good. We have to keep it up. And now, really, we need to concentrate also on national courts and several forms of universal jurisdiction. Thank you for
Thank you very
listening.
much, Emilio, and thanks for this new term. Now the last speaker for tonight is Dr. Lex Stackenberg, Senior Advisor at ARDD and former Director of UNRWA Operations. So, Dr. Lex, sorry for keeping you waiting a lot, and please, you have the floor now.
No. I was happy to sort of hear the presentation of all the excellent presentation of all the previous speakers, and allowing myself to further form my own thoughts that I would like to share. I'll start by sending you greetings and solidarity from Arab Renaissance for Democracy and Development, the social justice organization in Jordan that I have the privilege to work for, and for whom I lead a program on the question of Palestine, and to also thank you and congratulate you for organizing this excellent discussion ahead of tomorrow's day of International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. So very, very timely that we are having this opportunity. So thank you for that. I obviously echo the comments by all the previous speakers about the significance of the arrest warrants, and I like Emilio's one of Emilio's observations, that we're only beginning to realize the magnitude of this and the multiple implications. One implications that was not referred to, I think, by other speakers, or maybe indirectly, is that the arrest warrants represent an enormous victory of what Shahad Amouri, a phenomenal Palestinian human rights lawyer, has called the Lawyers' Liberation Front. And by using this phrase, Lawyers' Liberation Front, she's not referring to an NGO or to an organization or even a military front or what have you, but to all the lawyers, the hundreds and if not thousands of lawyers around the world that for the last 50 months, but many of them already starting many years ago, decades ago, have sort of started an effort at sort of reclaiming international law, reclaiming the UN, reclaiming the institutions that were created after the Second World War, including the International Criminal Court, including the International Court of Justice, and trying to undo the sort of the hegemonic use and cynical use of international law to maintain sort of domination over large parts of the world, maintain the colonial and imperial domination that international law was initially sort of created for. So it's a huge victory and a huge encouragement for all those lawyers who have been working tirelessly. And one of the reasons, indeed, I mean, Emilio asked the question, you know, how has it been? There has been an enormous advocacy and engagement with the ICC, with the Office of the Prosecutor. Emilia, you're part of it, and you mentioned Gilles Devers, and thank you for doing that, because you know it didn't come by itself. It was the result of tremendous work, and it's indeed an important sort of step forward in the pursuit of accountability for violations of international law. When I studied international law in the late 1970s, early 1980s, my then professor of international law was sort of telling us that, you know, the 20th century had been the era of codification, and the 21st century would be the era of accountability and enforcement and giving international law teeth. And I remember very well that he said, you know, this is your, ladies and gentlemen, this is your responsibility to work towards that end. And I think we're seeing a small evidence, a small victory of that with respect to these arrest warrants. Just an indication of how significant they are is the level of attempted pushback by Israel. Israel is very nervous about this for you know a wide range of reasons. Israel has tried every possible way to sabotage it. One of the reasons it took 6 months between Khan's announcement that he had requested arrest warrants and the actual permission of the pre-trial, or the actual decision of the pre-trial chamber to issue them, is indeed, you know, significant Israeli attempts at trying to once again undermine the process and try to sort of slow it down. And now they have issued a notice of appeal. Israel is really afraid, because this has teased. There's a huge reputational damage, but it also scares the hell out of large part of the Israeli army. A lot of on the one hand, you have those soldiers who have proudly broadcast on social media, you know, evidence of the most atrocious crime that they have perpetrated. You also have those soldiers that, you know that international law contains provisions about criminal international responsibility, and if now the senior leaders of the country are wanted for war crimes, this will have a huge trickle-down effect. More importantly, also, as you know, publishing a decision to request arrest warrant is sort of the exception to the rule. The normal process for the ICC and for similar domestic processes is that, you know, the decision to seek arrest warrants, and then also the decision to grant them or to issue them, is not published. And a lot of Israeli officials in the army, and not just the most senior officers in command positions, will get nervous when they, you know, after either resuming their reserve status or for soldiers in military draft, for ending their military subscription, you know, go and travel and backpack in Thailand or in other parts of Southeast Asia or wherever, and then in the back of their minds, you know, when they leave the plane, you know, maybe being concerned about potentially, you know, showing their passport and then someone telling them, "Sir, can you please come with us?" Or So yes, that's it has huge implications at Israel's domestic level. It was also all over the front page news media in the Arab countries, in the Gulf countries, and other parts of the Arab world. Even much more than the ICJ rulings, both in the genocide case and in the advisory opinion. And this is also important for a number of important reasons. And one that I just want to mention here is that it is sort of upping the ante with respect to normalization. Trump will undoubtedly try to see as one of his foreign policy victories Abraham too, and he will undoubtedly go back to MBS and urge him to reconsider moving forward with a normalization deal. Arrest warrants like these and the whole dynamic around it. We've seen that MBS in the Islamic Summit 3 weeks ago has been explicitly referring to genocide and has been terming what is happening in Gaza as genocide. Very, very strong language for a Gulf leader. The fact that these arrest warrants have been issued, is making it harder for him to sort of accommodate pressure from Trump to go ahead with some sort of normalization deals. Also in Europe, leaders are getting nervous. Yes, they're zigzagging, they're trying to find ways out, but many younger European leaders, with still long careers ahead of them, have to choose whether what is worse for their long-term career, being sort of criticized by Israel or pro-Israeli groups for being anti-Semite, or being criticized for being genocide enablers and being on the wrong side of history. And so again, the arrest warrants sort of bring that dilemma out more profoundly. The arrest warrants have also, are showing a convergence now between, the pursuit of individual criminal responsibility, which the ICC process is about, and the pursuit of state responsibility, holding Israel as a state responsible for genocide, for other atrocity crimes, and for the illegality of the occupation. It's also very important that these two tracks of accountability make progress. Another impact will be on the business community. The ICJ advisory opinion on the illegality of the occupation have given a tremendous boost to BDS. Essentially saying that BDS is the appropriate strategy to bring to an end the illegal situation. Business leaders will be strongly influenced by that. So, yes, please.
Sorry. I mean, are you done, or can we?
I'm done. This was my last. This was my last point. So it's just I was just touching on a series of areas where I believe the arrest warrants will be felt, and it's much wider than sort of the pure application of the law. There's huge psychological and I would even say sociological implications.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lex, for these contributions. Very informative. And now, since all our guests have already spoken, and now, if anyone wants to add something or have a comment on others' comments or contribution, please, he can go ahead. Is there anyone who wants to add something? Emilio, go ahead.
Yeah,
We have 1 minute.
Yeah, less than that. I just wanted to highlight the fact that we should not lose our north, because you know, of course, for me, Palestine, Gaza is a priority today, but actually our battlefield is in two fronts, and not only Gaza and Palestine, but also domestically. It's very important to bear in mind our domestic fight for whatever signs remain of democracy in our countries, because actually one important thing that we learned in these 14 months is that the US and many European countries, I mean, look at Germany, they are willing to risk whatever pretense of democracy, you know, they have left to protect Israel. We see it in terms of freedom
Hello, Emilio.
of speech, but also the application of
Go ahead.
anti-terror. So democracies doesn't really reassure me, because what I see today in Western democracies is that people are bystanders of power. I mean, we see more and more these governments going ahead with unpopular, I mean, clearly unpopular measures and policies. I mean, Patrick knows about right, the retirement pension in France, right? They passed it bypassing parliament and bypassing the huge demonstrations. I mean, millions of people in France, and Macron did not care, right? So the problem is that we are somehow just bystanders of power today, and we need to regain our position in our domestic politics. And because, you know, this is very important, because let's not forget that a genocide in these 14 months was carried out, and we were unable to stop it. And we should never forget that. Genocide, and this is my last word, genocide today, and this is a message actually, genocide is a perfectly legitimate political alternative for these powers, and that should worry us.
That's right. Either somebody else wants to have a last word before we leave?
I got one more thing. I really think
Go ahead,
Benjamin
Patrick.
Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu pursuing these policies is committing a political suicide. And I think anybody who assists and aids him is committing political suicide in their country too. Just like Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, they supported Benjamin Netanyahu no matter what, and they paid for it in the elections. And I think as time is on our side, all these politicians are supporting them. They're all losing their seats. So I think time is on our side. We just all wish it was happening a little bit faster, but time is on our side.
Hopefully. Thank you, Eric. Marius, go ahead. Have a minute.
Thank you very much. Yeah, just briefly, I've really enjoyed listening to all of the speakers, and in particular, I've really enjoyed the impassioned defense of the law and of international law. We've heard that, you know, although the solution might need to be political in many respects, that what the law can do is offer us an objective truth. I think we heard that, and Emilio, you mentioned that. And I do think that's already what the arrest warrant is. It's an objective truth standpoint where we can look at it from an impartial judicial perspective. I also just think going forward, I mean, there are times where political language is necessary and is useful, but also I think the law provides us with an objective language where we can call out things which are or appear to be war crimes, crimes against humanity, human rights abuses. And this objective language really does help us to push back. So, you know, we can get lost in political language and competing ideas of the truth, but where there is attempts to distort the law, and we've certainly seen that in this conflict, for the convenience of certain actors, it's a lot easier to push back as to why that is an improper use of the law. So yeah, I've enjoyed listening to that, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthias, for your comment. Anybody else wants to add something? Okay. Thank you very
Patrick
much.
has his hand.
No, I just wanted to
Patrick.
say thank
Ah,
you.
Patrick, sorry.
No,
I
I didn't push the put my hand. No, just to
No,
say thank you
you
very much.
You don't need to.
No, but I know that I could express, and everyone here can express this great
Sure.
moment we've lived. And thank you for organizing it. There's a lot of potential, and I agree with all what I said about impacts. I appreciate a lot all what has been said, including by our friend from speaking from Amman. This is absolutely great opportunities. We are in deep trouble, but we have tools to move forward. And as Pete Seeger said when I was young, is which side are you on? And we are on the right side.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution and for this very valuable time and input. And on behalf of the Arab Organization for Human Rights in London, thank you all and goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.